Good morning. Today is Thursday, July 25th, 2024. Vatikravna benos Tzelafchad. The daughters of Tzelafchad approached Moshe. Tzelafchad was a Jewish man, who was part of the Exodus from Egypt, and he had 5 daughters. And these 5 daughters, in our Torah portion, Pinchas, approach Moshe, and they say to him as follows: Avinu meis bamidbar. Our father passed away during the years in the desert. Remember, our portion is taking place at the end of 40 years in the desert as the Jewish people are getting ready to enter the land of Israel. And remember, of course, they're entering from the east going west. They're going to cross, they're in what is now Jordan, and they're going to cross the Jordan River into Israel. And so these 5 sisters say, Avinu meis bamidbar. Our father died in the desert, and so far, the only commandment that Moshe had communicated from God about inheritance is that sons inherit and firstborn sons inherit a double share. That's the only rule of inheritance that has been commanded so far. There is nothing in the Torah up until now to cover a situation where there are only daughters and no sons. So they have 5 daughters, they're no sons. So they say, our father died, lama yigara, why should we lose out from receiving any share in the land of Israel? Tna lanu achuza, give us an inheritance. What's going to be with us? Give us an inheritance to be able to have a part of a possession in the land of Israel, just like everybody else. So the Torah says, Vayakrev Moshe es mishpaton lifnei Hashem. Now, what that pasuk means to say is that Moshe brought their question to God, because Moshe didn't know. Again, as I said, Hashem had not specified how a family of only daughters would inherit. And God answers Moshe's question and says, yes, Benos Tzelafchad, the daughters of Tzelafchad, these 5 sisters, they will inherit their father's portion in the land of Israel. Their father's portion, they will inherit equally. That's what it means. But that's not what it says. It does not say that Moshe asked God. There are other places in the Torah where Moshe asks God. We know how those words are how that question is phrased. But it does not say Moshe asked God. It says vayakrev, from the word karav, to come close. Moshe brought their question close to God. What does that mean? It's an amazing thing that 2 people can do or say the exact same thing, but the meaning or the significance can be very, very different. I'll just give you one example. In the previous generation, one of the greatest Torah scholars, teachers, and leaders was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. I've mentioned him to you many, many times. Not only was he an incredible scholar, respected leader, but he had a most developed, refined character and way of speaking and sensitivity. Now, while Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky was active in the later part of his life, he lived in Monsey, New York. Earlier, he lived in Toronto for a number of years, but later in life, he lived in Monsey. And during the time that he was alive, there was a great Hasidic Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. He was the Satmar Rebbe, somewhat of a controversial figure, but a very important figure within the Hasidic world. And when he passed away, the Satmar Rebbe, there was a new Rebbe of Satmar. So this is now a younger Satmar Rebbe who is now taken over from Rav Yoel Teitelbaum. And and this is common, protocol, act of respect, when a person achieves a position like becoming the new Satmar Rebbe, you go to visit with the elder sages of the Jewish people. And so, based on this protocol, as a sign of respect, the new Satmar Rebbe came to visit Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky to introduce himself, to pay his respects. There is a cultural difference between the Torah scholars who come from the Lithuanian tradition, the Ashkenaz Lithuanian tradition, of which Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was a prime example, and the Hasidic world. Of course, there are many different types of Hasidim, but the Hasidic world, such as the Satmar Rebbe. So one of the differences is that the Satmar Rebbe, the old one, the new one, they didn't travel alone. They traveled with an entourage. Wherever they went, they were accompanied by a large group of Hasidim, of students. Wherever the Rebbe went, the Hasidim went with him. So, this new Satmar Rebbe came to the home of Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky in Monsey, and he came with his large group. And so they all came into the house, they came into the living room, and it's crowded because there are like 20, 30 young men together with the Rebbe, and everyone's kind of pushing and shoving to get to the front, to get closer. And another cultural difference between, again, the Lithuanian Ashkenazic approach and the Hasidic approach of groups like Satmar is that when there is a group like this within the Hasidic world, it can be somewhat chaotic, and everyone's kind of pushing. And within the Lithuanian tradition, there's a request for calm, for order, for standing in line, for being quiet. It's just a different cultural outlook. So there are lots of these students. So Rabbi Yaakov says to the Hasidim that if you go down the stairs to the basement, there are folding chairs. Go down to the basement and bring up the folding chairs. You don't have to stand and push. Everyone could sit down. It could be calm. We'll have a conversation. So the Hasidim, these young men, they go down. Each one goes down the stairs, gets a folding chair, brings it up, sits down, one after the other. Rav Yaakov is watching this, and he makes the following observation. He addresses these young men, and he says, you know, when somebody carries a chair from the basement up the stairs and sits on the chair, that person is the schlepper. They're schlepper. They're carrying chairs up and down. But if someone goes down to the basement and carries a chair and brings it up for someone else to sit on, that person is a Baal Chesed. That person has done a mitzvah. That person is kind and considerate. It's the exact same action. Going down the stairs, taking a folding chair, and bringing it upstairs. But there can be such a difference whether you're doing it in a selfish manner or you're doing it in a selfless manner. Okay, just one example. As I said, near the end of the 40 years in the desert, the Jews are on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. And within a short period of time, in these last few months, two groups come to Moshe asking for land. And on the surface, the request of both of these groups is very similar. And yet, Moshe's response was very different to each of these two groups. Excuse me. In next week's Torah portion, the Parsha of Matos, two tribes come to Moshe, the tribe of Reuven, the tribe of Gad. They come before Moshe and they say, Yutan es ha'aretz hazos lavadecha lachuzah. Please give us this land as our inheritance. Al tavirenu es Yarden. We don't want to cross the Jordan. They ask for land. And Moshe is upset with them and rebukes them because their request was to stay outside of the land of Israel. Remember, they're outside of Israel, just on the eastern bank in what is now Jordan. And they say to Moshe, we would like our land, but if you don't mind, we like our land now and here. We don't want to go into Israel. And Moshe is very upset with them. You telling me you want to decline the magnificent gift of the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel that God is offering to you? You want to take your land here? And Moshe criticizes them. But in our Torah portion, when the daughters of Tzelafchad come before Moshe in our parsha, very, very short time away, and they say almost the same words. They say, give us land. Now, Moshe could have seen their request as a purely selfish, material desire. We want what is best for us. We don't want to be left out. But Moshe was able to discern that the motive of the daughters of Tzelafchad was not selfish. It was the idealistic desire to be part of settling the land of Israel, living in a holy place and being an active participant in the magnificent endeavor to create the Jewish homeland. Moshe did not know the answer, but he did not just ask God. He brought their request close to God. Vayakrev Moshe es mishpaton livnei Hashem. Moshe elevated their request and presented it to God with the highest motives of why the daughters of Tzelafchad were asking this question. And God not only answered Moshe, but God agreed with Moshe's understanding of their request. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe, God says to Moshe, Lemor, as follows, Kain benos Tzelafchad dovros. The daughters of Tzelafchad have spoken truthfully, genuinely, sincerely. Nason titain lehem nachuzas nachala. You will surely give them an inheritance in the land of Israel. And this demonstrates, these words of God demonstrate that the daughters of Tzelafchad were asking with the highest motives, that the way Moshe presented the question was correct. The insight of Moshe, not just to the words of the question, but to the motivation of the question, was correct. Because, of course, you can ask almost the same question using almost the same words. And two different people can mean very different things by it, have very, very different motives. Moshe intuited their motive, and that is how he presented the question. And God agreed with Moshe that his presentation, his bringing close, elevating the question of the daughters of Tzelafchad was the right way to understand, and the answer is yes. Moshe could have seen the request of the daughters of Tzelafchad as base, as selfish, as he did the request of almost the same words of the two tribes of Reuven and Gad. But instead, he elevated the request of these sisters, and he brought it close to God. So often, so often, an action or a word can be interpreted more than one way. Sadly, we see this constantly in the public sphere, where one side looks for the most base motive of anything the other side says or does, or doesn't say or doesn't do. And I'm referring to every area of life. And if we're honest, we need to see that all too often that inclination is within ourselves. And we should try, where it's possible, to use Moshe's approach to the daughters of Tzelafchad to elevate it. What we hear, what we see, what we don't hear, what we don't see, to elevate it, to look at it in its most positive light, to see the actions and motives of others in the best possible light. That's the view that we need to have and encourage in others. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.